We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And as you all know, we have been working diligently through our replay series, and we are specifically focusing today on the last 2 episodes of WandaVision, which is crazy because this has been quite the journey through Westview. But today we're going to wrap it up, and because I know we're going to have a lot to talk about, I'm going to toss it over to Katie right away so that she can get us started.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I just need to start off by saying something. I gotta walk something back.
Oh,
5 years of saying this, and I gotta walk it back.
okay.
I was no longer underwhelmed.
Yeah, same.
Okay. Guys, this is such a big moment.
I was like, why is this so much better than I remember?
You know what it is, though? I think when we sit here as a fandom and we really pull everything apart, which is not a bad thing. I mean, God, the Stranger Things fandom is currently doing it as we speak,
Yeah.
as we all wait until Christmas. So don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing. But I think when you talk so much and you're in so many internet circles, just almost repeating, it's like sounding like waves, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I think you almost get so sucked into it that you create this like intense narrative in your head that you're like, this has to be this extent of good because of XYZ.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I think because of that, and also guys, we can't not consider the fact that this came out during COVID
Yeah.
when people were like at home.
Also, off the back of Endgame, which like the hype at that time, and I know that there was the Spider-Man in between, but like the hype at that time was so high. So I feel like if you look at it in the shadow of what it was coming out after, it's naturally we're gonna have some different feelings. But continue.
I personally don't really feel like Endgame was even a factor, though. I truly think, when you just look at the funnel in which this came out of, just the first Marvel project in almost a year. I mean, it's the first show. Everybody has been having the weirdest year of their life because of COVID. And so we're all on the internet talking nonstop about this show. Every theory is coming out of our butts. The Fly is Mephisto. Like, everything is being said. I think you start to expect so much out of an ending that when you watch it, you're like,
Yeah.
because where was Mephisto? Where was this? Where was all that?
Where's the multiverse?
Yeah.
I mean, still, where's the multiverse?
I mean, yeah. But here's the thing. When I saw The Fly this time, I just chuckled because I remember thinking about, oh my God, everybody thought that was Mephisto. And then just moved on.
Yeah.
And I wasn't at any point thinking Mephisto's going to appear. Like... And I do truly think we get kind of caught up, and the internet's great for being able to have this discourse. But at the same time, I do think we get so caught up into it that sometimes we're unable to enjoy things as much because we put these standards on it that the show itself has never proven it's going to show. So, or live up to, I should say. So, honestly, just watching it, I was like, actually, this really tied up the loose ends that the show created. If we take out the whole Mephisto thing, don't worry about that. I didn't. We're good there. Everybody else is like, Hayward's arrested and Monica's got her powers, and the end credit gets her up into space, and we see what happens with Wanda. We see what happens with Vision versus White Vision and like all this stuff. I'm like, no, actually, like it actually tied itself up very nicely.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because I have two main thoughts. I'm trying to decide what order makes most sense to go in. I'll start with this. I will say WandaVision was the first of the new saga, right? It was the first of the new era. And so I think we had put so much expectation on it because it was setting it up. But then if you look at it in terms of everything that's come out later, this set an incredibly solid foundation. I know we've been saying this the whole time. This set an incredibly solid foundation that the rest of the sagas, this is plural, have not lived up to. And so when you look at it in that context, not just of what had come before and where were we as a society, but also with what
Just to
came
clarify,
after.
you're trying to use the word phase, not saga, right?
Yep, sorry.
Okay.
I totally am.
I was gonna say, I was like, we're really only in the second saga, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I'm guys, if you listen to this week's Sister Scoop, you know that I was having a rough day on the day that we recorded this in terms of like brain power and the connection between brain and mouth. But we're going to do our best and we're going to recoup and it's going to be fine. But yes, for all of the following sagas, if you think about what came after, this is incredibly solid. And I think the expectations were just so high. And it's nice to look back at it and say, actually, this was one of the more solid pieces from the entire set of phases that we got after this. It's everything else that didn't really live up. And then you also think that from a narrative perspective, we always want to say that no show had gone a full cycle, right? Where we felt like it started well, it kept you through the middle, the pacing was good, and then it ended well. I actually want to take that back. In retrospect, I actually think this was the most solid show throughout its entire run. You have those first 3 episodes that, well, some may say are a little boring. When you go back on that rewatch, they're actually really fun. They're very different. You're trying to figure it out. You're looking at Easter eggs. You're trying to find clues. Super fun. The middle, you're starting to get more information and you're starting to put pieces together. And then at the end, to your point, it actually wraps up the different storylines exceptionally well. You don't have a ton of dangling stuff, but yet at the same time, it leaves enough threads open that you know where Monica's going to go next. You know where Wanda's going to go next. You have the door open for Vision to come back. There are all these things where you're like, okay, I see how this can, even Agatha got her own show after this. I see how this can spin off so many other things or set characters off into other trajectories. And it does that without feeling overwhelming in terms of, oh, now we have to write off this, and this storyline. And we created too many storylines. So you took something back. I want to take something back. My whole tirade about entering the White Vision late in the series, actually, as you look at it through the full narrative of the story, I think it was actually executed pretty well. So I will take that back and eat my words as well. And I can admit fault.
Do you want to know a really like hot take? Another one.
Oh no.
This one actually kind of, as I was watching it, I was like, oh, I'm mad at myself.
Uh-oh.
I wouldn't say it's completely less or like completely gone, but I do have less of a problem with Wanda's ending as well.
I do too, if you take it away from MOM.
Yes, in the sense that I think MOM went too far too quickly for people who hadn't seen Wanda since WandaVision, which was all of us, and we just didn't really get that. I think it went too far too quickly. But I would like to say, because I know somewhere else I've said, this doesn't make sense.
Multiple times we've said it, so it's not just you.
Yes. Yeah. I do have to say, I do think now actually watching the finale back and paying attention to it fully, because I know that other times I've rewatched WandaVision, I have not fully paid attention to the finale. I really wanted to pay attention to things Agatha said, especially when the Darkhold came into the picture.
Yeah.
And so I do think Wanda is still a good guy at the end inherently because she realizes she messed up.
Yeah.
But What really got me was when she said to Monica, I don't understand these powers, but I'm going to.
Yeah.
And she flew off. And then we find out she had the Darkhold. And obviously, Agatha in the ending also was like, there's an entire chapter of this book dedicated to you.
Yeah.
And I think when you kind of put that together, Wanda never had ill intent at all with the Darkhold.
Yeah.
Actually, as far as I'm concerned, from what I watched, Agatha never even made it clear that the Darkhold was bad.
Well, she does call it the Book of the Damned. So,
But here's Wanda, who during the entire last two episodes is like, I'm not a witch. I'm not this. I'm not this. She is continuously not willing to give into being a witch at all, let alone the Scarlet Witch. And when Agatha is introducing who the Scarlet Witch is, she's like, not only should you not exist, but you don't cast spells. You don't do any of this. You can rewrite the laws of reality. So, yes, like, and this is me adding this, technically she's a witch, but she doesn't play by any of the rules.
yeah. Yeah.
And so when Wanda is saying, like, I don't do any of this, I don't do it, yeah, you don't, because you're not your typical run of the mill witch.
Yeah.
You aren't going to cast spells. You aren't going to have a coven. You aren't going to do all of these things. And so I do think when you also are coming into a mantelpiece that you don't understand, and only one source of material apparently has knowledge of you, what are you going to do? Ignore it? It's sitting right there. So I do think having rewatched the ending and actually paying attention to some of the dialogue and just the things that Agatha said versus what Wanda was saying and how she came into the Scarlet Witch mantle and things of that nature, I actually think it makes complete sense that she turned to the Darkhold to read and try to understand herself. And in doing so, went down the spiral without full knowledge of that exactly being what she was going to do.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you pointed that out because I haven't been writing a ton of notes throughout this experience. This was actually the first set of episodes that I did because I knew that there was so much like exposition in the sense of like truly understanding who Wanda is. To your point, there's a lot of interesting tidbits about the Scarlet Witch that are then in some ways paid off in MOM. So I wanted to really, make sure I was pulling those out. And I actually have a note that was like, she goes to the Darkhold with good intentions. She goes to the Darkhold to understand her powers so that she doesn't do something like this again. Because if you think about it, everything that she has ever been blamed for, she's done by accident, right? When she
Exactly.
did that, she did Westview, she did Lagos. All of that was because she doesn't truly understand her power. She hasn't truly grasped her identity. And now she's starting to grasp that identity and really accept it, but now she needs to learn more about it. And to your point, that Darkhold piece is less of like, oh, I want to learn, dark magic and I want to get my kids back, and more like, I want to learn about myself so I don't hurt people again and do this again because I have a history of not being able to control my magic and doing more harm than good, or when I get really upset or things like that. And so that also really stuck out to me. But I think to what you were saying about Wanda and the whole like bad guy good guy roller coaster that we go on throughout the series, I think one of the things that I was really not surprised by, but I didn't remember this being emphasized as much, was when she finds out that she's truly hurting these people. Like, I think I because they portray her, or Lizzie's portrayal is a little bit more sinister in those middle episodes, you think that she understands that she's hurting these people, but she just understands she's controlling them. She genuinely believes that they are happy, that they are content, that they are at peace. So that you can see how that flip from, I'm just going to keep doing this, to, oh my gosh, I am hurting people and I have to stop this, happens because she gets new information. And I just don't think I remember that being quite so emphasized in the finale as it was, as I noticed in this rewatch.
Yeah, I will also just mention from my perspective, I don't think that's not true, but I do think when you're not being really faced with the things you're doing, it's a lot easier to kind of be like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not saying that's inherently true. I do think there's an aspect of it where she doesn't believe she's actually genuinely does not believe she's hurting them and just thinks that she's, as you said, kind of just like mind controlling them, whatever, but they're all good and dandy. Like, that's why we have that scene of her driving through town. Like, everybody kind of just looks like they're like don't have meaning in life, and you could tell like in her rewritten reality, if you will, she tries to give them all this meaning. but I do think it's almost like that whole idea of like mother knows best, because she sat here and like tried to do all of this for people. And then like, I think it's her real name's not Dottie, but we know her as Dottie, who's the first that Agatha releases, is like, I have a daughter. Like, let her be friends with your kids. Anything. I just want to see her. I just want to hold her. Like all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's stuff like that and being faced. It's literally being faced with your victims who
Yeah.
are sitting here telling you, "You're ruining my life. Go away. Stop. Let us go. Let us
We're
live."
having
I
your
like,
nightmares.
yes,
I did not remember that. That was
yeah. They're like,
crazy.
we go to sleep and we're having your nightmares. Like, let us out, please. Like all this stuff. I do think there is an aspect of just being genuinely faced with the consequences and the people you're hurting does also make you realize like, oh crap, because at the end of the day, she's not trying to hurt them on purpose. And I even think when she takes that road into being evil and being a villain, even in MOM, her whole concept, whether you agree with it or not, is it's one girl for me to find my kids and then I'll leave everybody else alone. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to hurt people, I'm not trying to kill people. She just has the only ability for me to get to my children. And so, again, I'm not saying I agree with it, but it's that concept of like, she's never actually trying to hurt people. They just unfortunately are literally collateral damage.
Yeah. Which is so interesting. I mean, if we're going to just like put a little bow on this, I do think that despite this narrative being well done in the show and her character development being well done, I do think that what ends up happening to her in MOM is completely too far, to your point, too far too quick. I think, we obviously see her using the dark hold. I know that's supposed to, hint at her corruption. I mean, I think Strange in MOM only uses it once and he gets the third eye. So
Yeah.
it clearly doesn't happen like it doesn't take more than one use, is I guess what I'm trying to get at here. And I guess even too, like when we hear her kids at the very end, it's supposed to hint that like she's getting into the deeper, the darker stuff. Like she's definitely just gone beyond the chapter about who she is. But I still think so much more of that needed to happen on screen. And I know they were trying to go for the shock value, and that's why we get the orchard scene and everything like that. But for us to have watched this character truly learn to accept herself and try to be better and try to learn so that she's not inadvertently hurting people and instead doing the complete opposite and being completely corrupted by the source of knowledge that she thought would help her. I mean, that's just it's a tough sell when it's done completely off screen.
I still fully agree. I think WandaVision as a whole has made me more appreciative of her downfall, because I kind of feel like I understand the connector a little bit more, because I don't remember a lot of the pieces. And so now rewatching it, I've allowed myself to really delve into it. But I do agree that not really telling more of that story, especially because I think what's hard is I don't entirely see Agatha as a villain either.
Especially after her show. I think it's harder.
Right. And I think because of that, I think it's hard to look at the Darkhold as corruptive as it is from a movie go, or from a MCU. Well, technically this is canon, but from like the Marvel's version of the MCU of what they have put out. The reason I say that is because if you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.,
Yeah.
you very much have seen the Darkhold in a very different capacity and how corruptive it actually is.
Yeah.
And I actually think that plays out a little bit more in that show, in my opinion, and how it really alters characters than we actually see in the MCU itself. And I think because I have that point of view, I can kind of be like, I know this book is doing this.
Yeah.
But I think from even the point of view of Agatha, and to your point, some of it has to deal with the fact we have gotten her show. We have learned to love her even more than we already did.
Yeah.
But I also just think she needs power to survive as a witch. And unfortunately, she doesn't have it as herself. She has to steal from other witches. And now that we also have her background, I think there's just such a soft spot for how she has gotten to where she's gotten. And even in the show, when they show, her mother and her mother's coven getting ready to kill her, and whether she meant to or not, she flips that switch and accepts the power, because why wouldn't she? I
Yeah.
mean, so I think, because I don't entirely feel like the introduction into the MCU the Darkhold has through Agatha is entirely super like, this book is the worst. It really is not good. It's gonna ruin people. It's also really hard for people at the end of WandaVision to be like, Wanda's gonna go AWOL.
Yeah, I think you bring up two good points. We'll stick with the Darkhold for a second, and then I want to talk about Agatha as a character in the end. One, with the Darkhold, I think it's another one of those things where they just assume that you have this knowledge. And I think you were kind of tapping on that when you were giving the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reference. But regardless of whether, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is your frame of reference, or the comics, or you did research, whatever, I think that's a lot to lean on the audience and say, like, you have to know, like, this book is corruptive. And I know, I mentioned earlier in the episode that Agatha calls it the Book of the Damned. And, like, yes, but that is really, to what I remember, like, the only reference in the episode that is saying, like, this book has corruptive and negative, it will have a negative effect on you, essentially. And otherwise it just seems to be this, like, really magical book.
Yep.
And you do see the black fingers, and that's maybe supposed to be like a visual hint. But again, like, if you're not someone who lives and breathes the MCU, if you're a casual fan, that's a big leap for someone to have to take if you're not familiar. So I
Yes.
do think that's a good point. And then that just makes that gap between WandaVision and MOM seem that much bigger, because if that groundwork had been laid around, this is what the Darkhold does and this is its effect on people, I think it would have felt better. And I know they do that in MOM itself, but still, like, you needed to have that in WandaVision to be able to believably understand what happens to Wanda off screen. I just think doing an MOM is too late.
Well, I would also even argue, like, without context, you don't pick up on the fingers at all.
Yeah, I mean, I was just watching because I know. But
Same,
again, to your
but
point.
I saw her fingers were black. To me, I don't know any knowledge. Like, if I was trying my absolute hardest to literally just watch the show, which is actually a testament, guys, because as an MCU fan and like somebody who covers so much of the content and everything else, it's very difficult to go back a lot of the times and just be like, wipe this from your brain and
Yeah,
pretend you're
like, you don't
watching
have all
this.
this context.
Yes. And I genuinely, I like saw the fingers and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I didn't remember that that's their way of trying to say Agatha has been corrupted. And because we've seen no other witch in the MCU, it is very difficult to sit there and say it's from the Darkhold.
Right.
Because it's really it's one of those details that, had we had more context, you'd be like, that's a perfect little Easter egg, right? Versus, because this is the first time, you're like, huh?
Yeah.
And it's not till, to exactly what you just said, MOM, when we see it corrupting Wanda and it being on her fingers and stuff, that you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you actually, like, you don't get it at first time, at the first time you're gonna see it. And so I do feel like that in itself, again, makes it difficult to be like, oh yes, this is corrupting, this is doing all this stuff, because it's not really stuff that you're aware of it doing.
Right. And it just is, like, I think the last thing I'll say about the Darkhold is, like, it is just kind of wild to cold drop the Darkhold into a show and give, like, one line of context. Like, I'm sorry, that book is so powerful. We watch it corrupt someone who used to be the Sorcerer Supreme in the next movie.
I mean,
And
I
you
think they
give it,
spent
like,
an
one
entire
line.
season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on the Darkhold alone. And the only
I think it was
reason,
the back half, because remember Ada gets corrupted, so there was the I think
oh
the
god,
LMDs.
no, I actually fully took that out of my brain. But I do know that Ghost Rider's the one who takes it
Yes.
with him. Like,
So it's like a
that's how
third
they
of the
get rid of it.
season. Yeah.
So it's the point of it is, regardless, it's like a super evil book. And
Yeah.
to kind of what you said at the beginning here, either you had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as a reference, you did your research, or like 90% of the people, you're going into this show going, oh my God, I love Wanda and Vision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And without many other pieces to it and whatever else, you don't get the context at all to this book being as bad as this book actually is.
And to what you were saying about the importance of the Darkhold is, like, it's one thing to be like, oh, we're just gonna toss this in for the hardcore fans. Like, they do stuff like that all the time. I mean, I wouldn't consider us, like, we're not comic book readers, but we do enough research ahead of time to be like, hey, I got that reference. get that reference. And so we can a lot of times catch those. But if you're someone who is not doing a ton of research, you're missing this whole thing. And the dark hold, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is the dark hold is too big of a concept, too big of a tool, too big of a potential like inanimate villain, essentially, to just be like, you only get this if you're a comic reader, if you've done the research, if you've watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, that's a really big concept to just be like, only about 40% of you are going to get this. That's kind of a big leap.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying like a lot of the pieces of it to me, when you go back and you're aware, you're like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah.
But when you're actively watching it for the first time, you're like, "Am I supposed to pick up on this?" And I do think that is to me is where that leap into Wanda's evolution, no,
Devolution.
devolution. I was like, I don't know if that was a word. Um but that going into MOM is where I think just kind of struggles. And I had the context, but I struggle. So I do think, I don't have an issue with it being introduced in this show. I have
Agree.
zero issue doing that. I just don't entirely think it was done the best way it could have been.
Yeah, I think it needed a lot more context for it to be an effective storytelling tool the way they needed it to be, especially since they relied on it to be a connective tissue between WandaVision and MOM. It needed a lot more setup for that to be possible. The one other thing since we're kind of talking about, the Darkhold and Agatha and everything around that, the one thing that I found myself really being stuck on, especially because to what you were saying earlier, like we've all grown to love Agatha. She's kind of quirky. She just beats to her own drum. She's slightly evil, but we're all kind of overlooking it. She was very sinister, especially, I mean, yes, episode 8 for sure, but she was more funny in episode 8, I felt. But in episode 9, when she fully dons the purple dress and the cape and the whole nine, and you see the black fingers and everything is, fully set up for her to be the villain, she is very, very sinister. And I kept thinking to myself, I don't remember her being, quite so focused on the power, quite so evil, all of these things. Because now, like, because of the last time that we've seen her, she was so, I don't want to say she's different because I still think she's a consistent character, but we have seen her evolve so much that seeing her in this version of herself was kind of jarring.
I honestly didn't feel that way.
Interesting.
I honestly also thought as a villain, she did her job.
For sure.
But I also was not like, this is strange to see Agatha like this because I don't think she seemed that different to me personally. That was not something I noticed all too much. I also think, and again, maybe this is the one area I'm not sure I could fully separate from watching Agatha all along. But like I know her story now, so
Yeah.
I do struggle with knowing like the power she is needing, and also knowing that she has the dark hold. There is the part of me that's like, she's just being so corrupted by it that like you can kind of see she's not inherently ever a good person.
Right.
That she is who she is, but you aren't like, I think because in Agatha all along we've seen her not under the influence of it, it makes it just not really, I don't know, I just don't really look at it differently.
Yeah, no, I still think she's a consistent character. I think just because we had most recently seen her as, to your point, not being actively corrupted, is she morally gray at best? For sure. But even by the end, like she is starting to kind of maybe turn the corner a little bit, and she's still always going to be morally gray, but maybe toward the lighter side than previous. And I think because of that, it is just kind of interesting to see her fully under the influence of the Darkhold and how, power hungry she really is. Not to say that she's not an Agatha all along. I mean, the whole show is she's trying to do exactly what she's done for all these years and siphon off the magic. But I just, for that reason, I think it really was like, oh, this was our first introduction of truly Agatha Harkness. And I was like, wow, she's, to your point, she's the villain and she's quite evil, and she really does come quite a long way then throughout her show when she's no longer under the influence of the Darkhold.
I think for me, the thing that I actually noticed the most about her was a little bit of sadness that she was the villain.
Yeah.
Mainly because one, I think the two of them would have been really fun as friends,
Yeah.
which we obviously saw throughout the show, but like genuine friends.
Yeah.
I also think just in I mean, I don't know how long final battles go on, guys. To me, it was 30 minutes. To them, it could have been 3 hours. I don't know. But just in that time frame, the things that she taught Wanda, and that's the thing that she kind of kept saying is, you don't even know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, you're just out here doing it. You have no clue. You don't understand the rules. Like, that's how she got her trapped with the runes initially. Cause she's like, you don't even know this basic witchcraft stuff because
Yeah.
you have zero clue and you don't even seem to want to. And I actually do think it's kind of interesting because I enjoyed, and maybe this is why I don't really feel that disconnect slightly with her, or like not disconnect, but how you're feeling. Because at first, regardless of the power, she was sitting there trying to figure out what the heck this baby witch is doing who
Yeah.
can do all of this. Because she even says, she's like, you're out here, you're running this spell miles out of town,
Yeah.
and you're not even batting an eye.
Yeah.
She's like, like, it's almost like jealousy, but
Mhm.
not even jealousy more than it's just like frustration as somebody who's worked so hard to hone her own craft, and then you have somebody who's doing it so naturally. And I think that's something many people can relate to in many different ways. I mean, think of a hobby, a talent, anything else you've put so much work into, and then there's always somebody who's just such, they're just naturals to it, and it's frustrating because it's
Yeah.
like, I've done so much, and for what? Because here we are, and like, you could just bypass me in 5 seconds. And so I do think, even from that perspective, from like this almost jealousy and frustration perspective, I was like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get all of this. And Wanda doesn't care. She doesn't care to learn this stuff. And so I felt sympathetic, but I also was like, it sucks because I would have really liked to see these two pan out to be friends, because I do think there is so much that Wanda could have learned, and I wonder how that could have gone very differently for both of them, had maybe even the understanding that Agatha was being corrupted, because again, we're not that is not clear in the entirety of the series, and
Yeah.
therefore not clear to Wanda either, that the Darkhold is corrupting Agatha.
No, exactly. And I do hope, obviously we all know she's coming back. Wanda, Agatha is existing as a ghost. Maybe we'll get some opportunity. I mean, she's basically like Wanda's son's guardian
Yeah.
at the moment. So, when Wanda comes back and inevitably wants her children again, I'm sure, they'll cross paths. But I do also, there's one other thing that I want to kind of focus on in episode 9 in relation to the dark hole, the Scarlet Witch, and all those conversations, because there's a conversation and a line that Agatha says that I think is so important when you think about Nexus beings and all that conversation that may or may not have ever panned out. The idea of the Nexus being, of course, being one that there's only one in the whole multiverse, yet we see in MOM that there are multiple Wanda Maximoffs, right? They just are not all owning of the mantle of the Scarlet Witch. They may have powers, but they never kind of ascended to that level. And Agatha has this really interesting line, and I'm going to paraphrase, but she basically says, the Scarlet Witch is not born, she is forged, something along those lines. And so it really kind of drives home when you think about it in retrospect, the idea that all of these tragedies, and I laugh because it's so horrifying, which is an odd, response, but here we are, all of these tragedies that have happened to Wanda, the death of her parents, the death of Pietro, what happened in Lagos, Civil War, the death of Vision, all of it had to happen in order for her to become the Scarlet Witch. And for this version, 616, Wanda Maximoff to become the only Scarlet Witch in existence. And I really wish that we had spent more time talking about that and what that means for the multiverse, especially because she kills herself in the next movie. And so, obviously, we all know she's either going to be back or is still alive somewhere. But I do think that that is a missed opportunity from a storytelling perspective for this character, because it would have truly given us the opportunity to dive into the multiverse in a different way and understand it differently from the magical perspective that I think is missing when we only got MOM as, the next movie from a magical perspective related to the multiverse.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And maybe this is gonna be a dumb statement. I'm not entirely sure. I'm worried about it from the multiversal perspective more than I just want to understand the Scarlet Witch and how Marvel in and of itself is depicting this entity. I do agree that every piece of Wanda's story got her here, but I would argue, honestly, the only thing that really mattered to me was when she came into contact with the Mind Stone. I think that, from my perspective, Wanda was always destined to be the Scarlet Witch because the Mind Stone situation was only what, the second of all the story parts that we saw. That was only part two. We saw part one when her parents blew up, and even Wanda even says, like, or I'm sorry, Agatha even says, so we saw a baby witch that was going to die on the vine, and then this saved it. But it wasn't just that. We literally saw the Scarlet Witch entity greet her, if you will. And so to me, once that happened, the Scarlet Witch entity was already within her. She just needed to unlock it. I just think she was also always predisposed to it happening to her specifically because of the way it played out with the Mind Stone after that point. I could not tell you why I feel that way other than that's just my perspective of how it was played out. From the other direction, from the multiversal direction, which I guess again, like I would like to understand the Scarlet Witch itself because I don't entirely feel like WandaVision did enough for me to understand how this entity works. Because even Agatha was like, you shouldn't even exist. So, like, that in and of itself, I'm like, tell me why. Like, tell me why she should not exist. Get into the nitty gritty. But then, as you said, kind of putting that on that bigger platform of like, okay, Nexus being there aren't other Scarlet Witches in the multiverse. There are other Wandas with powers. How does that play to this, this, and this? How does a Wanda who went through all the same life events, why were they not chosen to be the Scarlet Witch when the Mind Stone touched them versus, you know, this one or whatever? I think like those are all questions I have in general. And I also, and this is maybe for the comic book fans, but is this true in the comics? Is the Scarlet Witch a Nexus being? Is she the only one that exists in one individual universe?
You know, if you had asked Taylor, who was leading up to MOM, I probably could have told you that answer because I feel like we did that research and I feel like it was also potentially inconclusive. I feel like with everything with the comics, like things are so retconned over time. I mean, I think in the current comics, like the whole Maximoff family, like that keeps changing too, like who their parents are and everything. If I'm remembering correctly, like that's always changing.
Yes.
So if you're gonna change their parentage X amount of years afterwards, like I can't imagine that other attributes of them aren't changing. Which does make it a little difficult because you kind of have to be like, okay, well, at what storyline are you taking this from, or you know, which origin story are you going to lean into because there's multiple here. So yeah, I have no idea, long story short, because I think that's a little bit challenging, especially because, you know, yes, you talked about the little baby witch part and what Agatha says, which to me, I have chosen to believe means she has the mutant gene
Yeah.
because it was pre-existing prior to the Mind Stone, then was, you know, activated during the Mind Stone, which I think helps, you know, retcon that piece in pretty nicely and allows her to kind of lean into that aspect of the character in the comics, which has obviously been missing since Age of Ultron and the way that they introduce them without ever uttering the big M word. But it's challenging because I think with this character, there's so much opportunity related to her genetics, and I would like them to lean into that. And some of the groundwork has been laid, but they've got a lot of work to do, and they've chosen to emphasize other aspects of who she is without that specific gene alteration.
I would actually have to argue there's no proof she's a mutant.
Right.
But like that was what everybody kind of went with, and even we went with. But I think Agatha, now that we're getting, especially now that Agatha all along has come out, we've gotten so much more background on witches, and they are not mutants. And so now I kind of sit back and I'm like, I don't think we can necessarily say that's true.
I hear you. I do. I mean, I think if you're going to look at it completely objectively, that is a very sound argument. Where I'm coming at it from, because I need things to fit in the way that I want them to go.
Oh, so you're doing it because this is how you want it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm absolutely projecting. Is Wanda in the comics is both the Scarlet Witch and a mutant, so both things can be true, and I am
Obviously.
choosing to believe that both will be true. because I refuse to believe that you now are bringing the X-Men in and you're not going to include you've also not only have you brought the X-Men in, but you have elevated her from Wanda Maximoff, who doesn't have a code name, which they made extremely clear in this show, doesn't have a name, to Wanda Maximoff is the Scarlet Witch, and you're bringing in the X-Men, you're going to tell me that that's not going to be connected? That is a huge miss. Huge miss. So I'm just projecting what I want, but also because it has not been confirmed the other way.
I mean, and that's fair. I would say an argument in the direction is that Pietro also has powers after coming into contact with the Mind Stone. They're the only two who survived all of the experimentation. So it goes to in the favor of mutants that they both happen to have gene and the Mind Stone just awakened it,
Right.
which is again like if I'm playing almost devil's advocate to my own point. I should say it's not really my point of view. It's just something I'm bringing up because I do think Agatha all along proved, there's a lot of witches out there that have nothing to do with being mutants at all.
Right.
So I do have to say, if we're trying to just talk about Wanda, and quite frankly, this sounds awful, but like Marvel's made it clear Pietro's not meant to be in the picture anymore. Like, I don't
Crazy.
mean to be rude, but the story is now supposed to be Wanda's story fully by herself. The twins are not the twins. They haven't been since their first and only appearance together.
Yeah.
I do think going off just what we've been seeing with her, it does kind of bring up the question, was that proving that she had the ability to or she or had the mutant gene, or is she just sitting there and she's a baby witch? And then her brother, who went under the same experimentation, happened to be able to have the power. I don't know. Who's to say he didn't have some weird magic in him too? I mean, where did hers come from? Nobody knows. And it just happened to manifest in a different way for him. Who knows?
Yeah, it's gonna be so fun with the coming of the X-Men because we always talk about street level versus magic versus space, and those have kind of been the three lanes that we've been operating in, and the multiverse kind of winds around through all of them to some extent. And then you get to the X-Men, and that's going to be a fourth category that's going to be so interesting because some characters are going to be X-Men plus street level, X-Men plus magic, X-Men plus, space, and it's going to
Well, a
be
lot of them blend. Like a lot of them don't really play in one area.
right. So it's going to be so interesting these characters who kind of break down these silos that I think we put up just as a framework of like understanding the storylines. And like for me at least, it helps me understand, okay, like this character fits here. So if they're a space character, it would be kind of weird if they showed up in this, street level show. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but to help kind of make predictions and things like that. And then you're going to get these characters who are just going to blow these categories out of the water, and it's going to be a little bit of a free for all, which isn't a bad thing. I just think it's going to be very interesting. And I think Wanda's kind of that first coming of these characters who are going to be kind of hard to put in a box, and these characters who can show up at any different place at any time because of just the nature of their powers and how complex these characters are. It's going to be really, really fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do just want to bring up because I feel like we'd be really remiss to miss this topic. Vision.
Yep.
The other name in the title. I think this was another one that I actually paid a lot of attention to for the first time.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, if you had asked me about the whole like ship of Theseus thing any other time, I would have looked at you like a deer in headlights because I would have been like, "What are you talking about?" Like the irony of this is, I actually understand the tale because I'm a weird Greek mythology junkie, but not. I would have been like, "What are you saying in Marvel?" Like I
Yeah.
have no idea because I don't think I've ever paid attention to what this man has actually been saying to himself in that
It's
scene
so smart
ever.
though.
It's so smart. It's brilliant. And I found myself sitting there like, wow. Like, I mean, it was like I was watching it for the first time because I truly don't think I've ever paid attention to it. Like, I was like, this is just so brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think how he kind of explains to White Vision who White Vision is, and then also kind of comes to terms with the fact that he's not the real Vision either. And kind of this whole weird concept of like, they in and of themselves are not really Vision. Neither of them are really Vision. I think it's just so interesting. And I think maybe because, and maybe you projected this a little too on accident, because we haven't seen White Vision return, I think it goes back to be like, ugh, they introduced White Vision and WandaVision and nothing has happened and blah blah blah. And so I think it kind of over time takes away from not only bringing this character back online, being done through Wanda.
Yeah.
She is the one who brought him to life once again, but also just kind of through his evolution, which you can already see is happening with his conversation with the Vision we have in Westview. And so when he leaves, he literally is like, in his head, it's like, I'm not this weapon of mass destruction, first and foremost. But second, I have these memories now that I cannot identify with emotionally, but I have them and they are mine and I've lived this life. And so I think to me, it actually makes me very excited to watch the Vision show because I think it has re-upped my interest in the character, in this version of the character, but it also has made me start to wonder a lot more how he's going to play himself in the show because of what we've seen of White Vision and how he's very different from what we've seen of Vision in general, even from when he first came out of the tube thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, this is a great time to be rewatching WandaVision, knowing that we're getting the Vision show next year and it'll be a lot fresher than whatever the last time I like halfway watched WandaVision was. And I think, knowing them that what did Paul Bettany say? That it was like a show about like fathers and sons and things like that. And we're getting, old James Spader back as Ultron, and we're gonna have Speed in the show. So it's gonna be about this like intergenerational interplay between like who is my maker, who am I in charge of, but then also at the same time I would imagine there's going to be a lot of conversation about like identity. I mean, we watched Billy go through it, right? At the end of Agatha All Along. I'm sure that Tommy is going to have a similar experience. We know Vision should be having a similar experience because he doesn't exactly know. To your point, he has these memories, but he's not tied to them. He doesn't feel anything when he thinks about them, but yet he came out of this show and I think he says like I am the Vision, meaning like I have his memories, I have his body, but there's still that disconnect, that emotion, which to your point when you were saying about Vision coming out of the tunnel, that's the thing that separates him, right? He essentially actually this could be interesting. This version of Vision, White Vision, is actually more like Ultron than he ever was like Vision, right?
Yeah.
Ultron could think, Ultron could keep memories, but he had no emotion. He had no empathy. He saw everything that was on the internet and he basically said humanity has to die, which is the very famous meme that everybody, talks about.
And it's fair. I get it.
But at the same time, this Vision, I think, is similar to that in that he's thinking logically and he has these memories, but they don't mean anything. There's no empathy there. And so it'll be interesting, I think, to see him in this show evolve, hopefully away from Ultron. But I think that's why we're getting, to whatever aspect or to whatever level Ultron is going to be in the show. I think that's why we're getting him to remind us that this is what Vision could have been. And this is what this Vision could still be, honestly, if he chooses or if he doesn't evolve to kind of have this emotional tie and the empathy that made our Vision so lovable. So I really, in retrospect, I really liked this storyline and I'm excited to see it kind of continue as we think about, his show coming up next year.
I also think obviously Wanda played such a prominent role in why he evolved, but he was evolving far before Wanda and him were anywhere where they were.
Yeah.
And I think that was because a lot of the Avengers and things like that. I mean, you have to think when Vision came online, it was during the peak of the Avengers being a team.
Yeah.
And it is kind of interesting because right now we don't have that, but that's not to say we don't have Avengers coming around the corner.
Yep.
So I do have to say, I think that aspect is a little interesting as well because we're not going to leave him out and stranded either. And I can't really imagine he would go down the villain route either. I think one kind of playing that with both of them is a little extensive.
Yeah.
I also think what's the reason? He would kind of just be Ultron if he succeeded. And it's like, okay, we didn't need this random what if scenario. Like we lived with Vision for how many other movies and things that like now we're gonna do this. But I do think it'll be kind of interesting to see if what brings him back from that kind of cliff will be the Avengers, the next, whether it's the new Avengers or Sam's Avengers or what, it'll be kind of interesting to see which team possibly is the one that kind of adopts him and brings him back and kind of humanizes him once again.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I think, knowing that for better or worse, these a lot of the characters, both in the new Avengers and Sam's Avengers, know Vision, whether they fought with him or against him, in Civil War. I think there's a lot knowing that there is a lot of interest in reforming the Avengers, there will be interest in bringing him on whichever side. And it could be interesting to see kind of how that plays out and how his very logical mind decides which Avengers are the real Avengers. That could be a really fun little thought experiment as well, because there's a lot of feelings involved, but Vision doesn't have feelings right now. He's just going to make the logical decision. So we might get an answer on a logical level of who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, I would like to see him join an Avengers team or the Avengers team, because I can't imagine after the events of Doomsday we're still doing multiple Avengers teams. I think that would be crazy.
Yeah,
But I am excited to see him return, because I do think he brings a different perspective. And even when he was our original Vision, who obviously had emotions, he still made a lot of decisions based off of logic. I mean,
for
I think
sure.
that's the whole point of the Accords.
Yeah.
That's why he sides the way he sides. So, which ironically is against his girlfriend. So, I do have to say I think it'll be kind of interesting to kind of see that more black and white way of thinking and maybe see how it evolves a little bit. Obviously, I don't expect to see it evolve. I might back that up. I would not be entirely shocked to see if they connect Wanda and Vision together again.
I hope they do. I don't think we got enough of them. I mean, for who they are in the comics and like their relationship, I would like to see them back together in a little bit more like on screen, because I think we get hints, right, in Civil War, we get hints in Infinity War, but a lot of that relationship is very much built when they're on the run and they're stealing those moments off screen. And so we don't really get to see them as a couple functioning in that way until WandaVision, and that's not even really Vision. So yeah, I'd be really into seeing that for sure.
I don't know if I would be. I think Wanda has such immense storylines I'd still like to see her play out, that I'm like, Vision, we all know you don't have room. We all know we don't need you in these, and y'all know which ones I'm talking about.
What, you don't think Vision belongs in House of M?
No. I also think I want to see a Wanda crash out when Vision creates his whole Vision family.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely direction for that right now because of the version of Vision that is living. I
That's
think,
fair.
he has his memories, but he might as well be the worst ex-boyfriend ever, because he literally is like, I've never actually cared about you.
Yeah, I'm emotionally detached.
Yeah, like I'm an avoidant, and so but I do think that is kind of an aspect. I mean, he's probably like low key the world's worst father too. Like,
Yeah.
let's think about it. So I don't know. I would like to. I don't want to say that they wouldn't reconnect, because I do think WandaVision left that very open to interpretation when they kind of say we'll find each other again and everything. But selfishly, I'd kind of like to see that kind of get laid to rest. It's not the Vision we know. And I'd like to see other storylines that they both have that don't entirely involve the other one.
That's fair. That's a good point. All right. Well, she's nodding silently at me. So I think that is a sign that we are all good. And we are going to wrap on our WandaVision replay, which it's been fun. It's been really, really fun and a great reminder, especially with some of the content that's coming out in the next year. So that'll be a good little refresher that we had late this year. Please make sure that you are subscribing on your podcast platform of choice so that you can stay up with us as we continue with new episodes throughout the rest of this year and, of course, into 2026. You can also check out our website and our Buy Me a Coffee, both of which are linked in the show notes.
You guys can also give us a follow on all of our socials, which are linked in the show notes down below. And next week, we will be continuing our replay series, but with a new piece of content. We will be starting The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Y'all know I'm excited for this. We will be covering episode 1. We will do episode by episode with this one, since there are only 6 and they are longer episodes. So keep an eye out for that. Make sure you guys are going back and watching if you'd like to keep up with us. If not, if you've watched the show, it's fine. We'll still have great coverage. But for the best listening experience, definitely going back and watching the episodes as we are watching them back definitely helps the most. So Go ahead and do that. And until then, Marvel just blew your mind. So let's talk about it.